The sun was high over downtown Atlanta, its light bouncing off rows of glass buildings and polished car hoods. The street buzzed with traffic and lunchtime chatter. Food trucks lined the curbs, office workers hurried by in tailored suits, and the sound of horns echoed between the tall buildings. Officer Ryan Matthews sat in his patrol car at the corner of 8th and Pine, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the crowd through his tinted window. It was a slow day, too slow. His eyes scanned the street, a reflex more than a thought, until they stopped on one man standing near a small cafe. The man was black, tall, dressed in casual clothes. Jeans, a dark jacket, clean sneakers. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just standing there, looking at his phone, occasionally glancing toward the corner like he was waiting for someone. Still, something in Ryan's mind clicked. That quiet, unspoken trigger he'd never admit out loud. Doesn't look like he belongs here. He lowered his coffee, eyes narrowing. What's he doing? He muttered to himself. The man glanced up, adjusted his jacket, and checked his watch. Nothing unusual. Yet, Ryan's hand automatically reached for the door handle. Just gonna check it out, he told himself, as if the thought needed permission. He stepped out of the cruiser, straightening his vest and adjusting his belt. The radio on his shoulder crackled quietly, but he turned the volume down. Across the street, the man looked up, noticed the officer approaching, and sighed softly. Not fear, just weariness, like someone who had lived this scene before. Afternoon, Ryan said as he stopped a few feet away. You've been standing here for a while. Everything all right? Yes, officer, the man replied calmly. I'm waiting for someone. Uh-huh. Got some ID on you? The man's brow furrowed slightly. Am I being accused of something? Ryan crossed his arms. Didn't say that. Just making sure everything's fine. This is a business area. We've had reports of suspicious activity lately. The man exhaled slowly. Suspicious? He repeated, the word sharp but quiet. You mean me? Standing here with a phone? Ryan frowned. Sir, it's a simple question. Let's not make this difficult. The man reached calmly into his pocket. I don't want any trouble. My wallet's right here. Several people walking by began slowing down, watching. A woman across the street took out her phone, already recording. Ryan's pulse quickened, not from danger, but from the eyes suddenly on him. The man handed over his ID. Ryan glanced at it briefly, but didn't really look. He was already convinced of something he hadn't even thought through. What are you doing in this area? Ryan asked again. The man sighed. I told you, I'm waiting for someone. Who? My assistant, he replied evenly. She's running late. Ryan's tone turned sharper. Your assistant? He chuckled under his breath. You some kind of boss or something? The man looked him straight in the eye. Something like that. Ryan didn't like the tone, calm, confident, not afraid. It unsettled him. Well, sir, I'm going to need you to step over here, Ryan said, gesturing toward the curb. For what? Just protocol, Ryan replied. You match a description. The man's jaw clenched. Of course I do. Before he could say more, Ryan's partner radioed in from the car, asking what was happening. Possible trespassing, Ryan said into the mic. The man shook his head. I'm not trespassing. I'm standing on a public sidewalk. Ryan took a small step closer. Sir, I'm asking you to cooperate. I am cooperating, the man said quietly. You just don't like that I'm not scared. That hit something deep in Ryan. Pride, defensiveness, the need to feel in control. Hands where I can see them, he ordered. The man sighed again, raising his hands slowly. The crowd nearby grew larger. People whispered. Cameras pointed. Ryan didn't notice the unease building in his own chest. He only saw what he thought was defiance, and what everyone else saw as injustice. In the reflection of a nearby cafe window, his own image stared back at him. Hand near his holster, jaw tight, eyes full of doubt he refused to name. He had no idea yet that the man he was detaining wasn't just anyone. He was about to learn who he really was, and how one decision could change everything. The sound of phone cameras clicking filled the air now. People had begun to stop. Office workers, delivery drivers, even a teenager on a scooter. They weren't close enough to interfere, but close enough to watch. Officer Ryan Matthews felt the heat rising in his neck. The man's calmness made him uneasy. He wasn't resisting, but he wasn't nervous either. That made Ryan feel like he was the one being judged. I'm not asking you again, Ryan said firmly, stepping closer. Turn around and place your hands on the hood. The man didn't move at first. He stared at Ryan for a moment, long enough for the silence to feel heavy. "Officer," he said slowly, "you're making a mistake." Ryan clenched his jaw. "We'll find out soon enough." The man turned, exhaling through his nose, and rested his palms against the hood of the police cruiser. His reflection stared back at him from the windshield. Calm face, steady eyes, no sign of fear. Ryan cuffed his wrists, trying not to notice the tremor in his own hands. Around him, the murmurs from the crowd grew louder. "Hey, he didn't do anything," a woman shouted from across the street. "Oh, why are you arresting him?" another asked, filming. Ryan ignored them. "Ma'am, stay back," he ordered. But his voice sounded thinner than usual. The man spoke quietly over his shoulder. "You really think this makes you right?" Ryan didn't answer. He was too focused on getting through the moment, on proving to himself that his decision wasn't about race or pride or bias. It was about procedure. It had to be. As Ryan guided him toward the back seat, the man turned his head slightly. "At least tell me what I'm being arrested for." Ryan hesitated. Loitering. Possibly casing businesses in the area. The man almost smiled, not mockingly, just tiredly. "Loitering," he repeated. "For standing on a sidewalk in daylight, wearing clean clothes, waiting for someone." Ryan swallowed hard. His stomach tightened, but he said nothing. Once the man was in the back seat, Ryan shut the door, taking a deep breath. He could feel the stares still burning into him. He muttered to his partner through the open window, "Let's just take him in. We'll sort it out later." As they pulled away, the man sat quietly in the back, hands cuffed in front of him, eyes fixed on the horizon. No anger, no shouting, just silence. The kind that carried more weight than any argument. "Name?" Ryan asked after a while, flipping through the clipboard on his lap. The man's voice was steady. "You already have it." Ryan glanced at the ID he'd stuffed into his pocket earlier, but hadn't read closely. He didn't check it yet. He didn't want to. Something about the man's composure made him feel smaller every mile they drove. At a red light, Ryan finally looked into the rearview mirror. The man's eyes met his, calm and focused. For a moment, Ryan looked away. "People like you," the man said quietly, "make it harder for the ones who actually serve right." Ryan's hand tightened around the steering wheel. "You don't know anything about me." The man's tone stayed even. "I know enough. You didn't stop me because of what I did. You stopped me because of what you thought I was." Ryan didn't reply. The light turned green, and the car rolled forward. The police station came into view. Gray, boxy, unwelcoming. As they pulled into the lot, the man leaned back and closed his eyes, whispering something under his breath. Ryan almost asked what it was, but decided he didn't care. He should have. Because before the day was over, those quiet words would echo back at him, in the most unexpected way. The police station smelled like old paper, burnt coffee, and stale air conditioning. Officer Ryan Matthews walked his detainee through the side entrance, nodding briefly at the desk sergeant, avoiding the eyes of his colleagues. "Picked him up downtown," Ryan said, handing over the paperwork. "Possible trespassing, loitering, suspicious behavior." The sergeant gave the man a quick look. Neat clothes, calm expression, handcuffed wrists, and raised an eyebrow. "He resisting?" "No," Ryan said shortly. "Cooperative." The sergeant shrugged. "All right, room 2. Ryan guided the man into the small interrogation room. 4 walls, 1 table, 2 chairs, no windows. The fluorescent light hummed softly overhead. Ryan unlocked the cuffs, but didn't step back far. "You can sit," he said. The man rubbed his wrists, then calmly took a seat. His posture was straight, his hands resting neatly on the table. There was no defiance, no anger. Just quiet composure, the kind that unsettled Ryan more than yelling ever could. Ryan sat opposite him, flipping through the ID he'd barely glanced at before. Finally, he read the name properly. David Brooks. Something about it tickled at the edge of recognition, but Ryan couldn't place it. He kept his tone professional. "All right, Mr. Brooks. Want to tell me what you were really doing downtown?" "I already did," Brooks said evenly. "I was waiting for my assistant. We had a meeting nearby." Ryan tapped his pen against the table. "A meeting for what exactly?" Brooks tilted his head slightly. "Is this a formal interrogation?" Ryan frowned. "I'm asking the questions." "Then I'll answer," Brooks replied, calm as ever. "I'm a federal employee. I had a meeting scheduled with a city developer about a project site inspection. I was early." Ryan's pen stopped mid-tap. "Federal employee," he repeated skeptically. Doing what exactly? Transportation and infrastructure, Brooks said. Division director. Ryan blinked. Division director, he repeated, almost laughing. That's a big title for someone hanging out by a coffee shop. Brooks leaned back slightly, folding his hands. You're assuming a lot for a man who hasn't verified anything yet. Ryan bristled. Listen, I've seen plenty of people claim all kinds of jobs when they get caught doing something they shouldn't. And I've seen plenty of officers mistake confidence for threat, Brooks replied softly. That one landed. Ryan felt a flush rise under his collar. He didn't like how this man's calmness made him feel. Small, reactive, unsteady. He stood, pacing once around the table. You said you work for the federal government. You got any proof of that besides your word? Brooks nodded toward the inside pocket of his jacket on the chair. There's an ID card. Go ahead. Ryan hesitated, then pulled out the leather holder. Inside was a sleek federal badge and an official ID that read, David Brooks, Deputy Director, U.S. Department of Transportation. The room went completely silent. Ryan stared at the badge for several seconds, his chest tightening. Then he looked up, but Brooks wasn't gloating. He just watched him, calm and patient. Now, Brooks said quietly, can I have my phone call, officer? Ryan's throat felt dry. Yeah, of course. He set the badge down slowly, like it might burn him. As Brooks stood, he straightened his jacket, every movement deliberate, dignified. Next time, try reading the ID first, he said softly. It saves you the embarrassment. Ryan said nothing. His mind spun with disbelief, guilt, and something else. Fear. Not of losing his job, but of what this meant about him. Brooks paused at the door. For the record, I don't hold grudges. I hold people accountable. That includes myself. Then he stepped out, leaving Ryan alone under the buzzing fluorescent light, staring at the badge on the table. The truth that had been sitting in his pocket the whole time. He didn't realize it yet, but this was only the beginning of the fallout. The sound of heavy boots echoed down the hall as Officer Ryan Matthews stood outside Interrogation Room 2, his mind racing. His palms were slick, his throat dry, and the image of that federal badge kept replaying in his head. He couldn't bring himself to look back through the glass window, where David Brooks sat calmly with his hands folded, as if he were the one conducting the investigation. A few minutes later, the door at the end of the corridor burst open. Sergeant Holloway, a broad man with years of gray in his beard and little patience for mistakes, stormed in. Matthews, he barked. What the hell am I hearing? You brought in who? Ryan swallowed hard. Sir, Don't, Holloway snapped. We just got a call from the U.S. Department of Transportation. You detained one of their deputy directors on suspicion of loitering. Do you have any idea what that means for us? Ryan's stomach twisted. He was acting suspicious, sir. I followed protocol. Protocol? Holloway's voice thundered. Protocol means you verify before you cuff. Did you even look at his ID? Ryan looked down. Not until later. The sergeant pinched the bridge of his nose. You just arrested a federal official. The mayor's office already knows. Internal Affairs is going to have a field day. Ryan tried to steady his voice. He didn't identify himself clearly. Holloway glared at him. He didn't have to. You had his ID. You chose not to read it. Before Ryan could respond, the sound of heels clicked sharply down the hallway. A woman in a navy pantsuit approached. Confident stride, no hesitation. She flashed her badge before anyone asked. Special Counsel Meredith Jones, Department of Transportation, she said crisply. I'm here for Deputy Director Brooks. Holloway stepped aside immediately. Ma'am, of course. He's in room 2. Jones glanced at Ryan briefly, her expression unreadable but cold enough to make him shift uncomfortably. You're the arresting officer? Yes, ma'am, he said, standing straight. She didn't blink. Then I suggest you get comfortable with paperwork. You'll be doing a lot of it. Ryan didn't move as she opened the door and entered the room. Through the glass, he saw her shake Brooks's hand, friendly, respectful, familiar. Brooks smiled faintly. Meredith, didn't expect you to come personally. She shrugged. Couldn't let them keep one of our deputy directors locked in a holding room. Her tone was calm, but her eyes flashed with anger when she glanced toward Ryan. Ryan couldn't hear every word, but he caught bits and pieces through the door. Brooks. He wasn't violent, just ignorant. Jones. That's not a compliment. Brooks, I don't mean it as one. Ryan's face flushed. He wanted to defend himself, but there was nothing to say. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Jones stepped out first. We're done here, she said coolly. Deputy Director Brooks is leaving. Expect a formal review within 24 hours. Brooks followed her, stopping briefly when he reached Ryan. For a moment, neither man spoke. The station had gone quiet, everyone pretending not to watch. Finally, Brooks said softly, Officer Matthews, you were doing your job. The problem is, you forgot what your job actually is. Ryan's jaw tightened. Meaning? Protect and serve, Brooks said. Not assume and judge. Ryan looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Brooks nodded once, then walked out with Jones at his side. The door closed behind them and the echo of their footsteps lingered in the hallway long after they were gone. Sergeant Holloway turned back to Ryan. You better hope he doesn't press charges. Ryan stood frozen. Do you think he will? Holloway stared at him for a long moment. If I were him, I'd do worse. The words hit harder than any punishment could. Ryan sat down heavily on the bench, the image of Brooks's calm, unwavering eyes replaying in his mind. Not angry, not cruel, just disappointed, and somehow that felt worse than hate. The next morning, Officer Ryan Matthews sat in the lobby of the city administration building, his hands clasped tightly, his uniform freshly pressed. His badge felt heavier than usual, like it carried more weight than pride. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw David Brooks's calm face staring back at him under the harsh fluorescent light of the interrogation room. When the summons came in, report to City Oversight Committee, 10 a.m. He already knew who would be there. The receptionist glanced up from her desk. Officer Matthews, you can go in now. Ryan stood, straightened his uniform, and stepped through the glass doors into a sleek conference room filled with people in suits. At the far end sat David Brooks, dressed impeccably in a dark gray suit, his federal badge clipped to his pocket. He was talking quietly with two committee members, but stopped when Ryan entered. The room went silent. Officer Matthews, said one of the city supervisors, please, have a seat. Ryan nodded stiffly and sat opposite Brooks. The long wooden table between them felt more like a barrier than furniture. The supervisor cleared his throat. We've reviewed the footage and your report. You detained Mr. Brooks yesterday without probable cause. Would you like to explain why? Ryan swallowed hard. Sir, I acted based on behavior I deemed suspicious. The area had recent theft reports. Brooks's voice cut in, calm but sharper than before. Suspicious behavior? I was standing on a sidewalk, checking my messages. If that's suspicious, you'd have to arrest half the city. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. I understand that now. Do you? Brooks asked quietly. Because when I handed you my ID, you didn't even look at it. You saw what you wanted to see. The supervisor raised a hand. Gentlemen, let's stay civil. Brooks leaned back slightly, his tone measured. I am civil. I'm also tired. Tired of this pattern, of being treated like I don't belong in the same spaces I helped build. The words hit Ryan like a punch. He wanted to argue, to explain that it wasn't personal, but deep down, he knew it was. It always was. I didn't mean any disrespect, Ryan said finally. Brooks studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Intent doesn't erase impact. That silence hung heavy over the room. One of the committee members turned to Brooks. Mr. Brooks, do you wish to file a complaint? Ryan's stomach clenched. He braced himself. Brooks looked at him. Really looked this time. No, he said finally. I'm not here to ruin a man's career. I'm here to remind him what his badge is supposed to mean. Ryan exhaled quietly, a mix of relief and shame washing over him. Brooks continued, his tone calm but firm. I've worked with law enforcement agencies across this country. The best officers don't lead with suspicion. They lead with respect. If we ever want to rebuild trust, that's where it starts. The committee nodded silently. Then, Brooks turned slightly toward Ryan. You'll make mistakes, officer. We all do. What matters is what you do after them. Ryan met his gaze. I understand, sir. Brooks held his eyes for another moment, then stood. Good. Because understanding isn't enough. You have to change. He gathered his folder and nodded politely to the committee. Gentlemen, that's all I needed to say. As he left the room, Ryan stayed seated, staring at the empty chair across from him. The same chair where, only a day earlier, a man he'd handcuffed now sat as his superior. For the first time in his career, Ryan didn't feel like a cop. He just felt small and painfully aware of how easily power blinds.